gluconeogenesis. You know what gluconeogenesis is. We'll talk about regulation and a lot of the why questions.
Maybe just like put your name on it.
A lot of, you can imagine, gluconeogenesis we've already talked about, and it's basically the opposite pathway of glycolysis. It's formation of glucose from building block materials, formation of glucose, so it's the opposite direction. Of the 10 steps of glycolysis, how many are reversible?
Three. No, 7.
3 minus 10, or 10 minus, that would be negative 7. 10 minus 3, that would be a good answer, right? 10 minus, let's say that. 7 steps are reversible, right? You have 7 reversible steps, you have 3 irreversible steps. You can imagine glycolysis, or gluconeogenesis looks a lot like glycolysis, except for 3 steps, those 3 irreversible steps. All the reversible steps are the same, right? We don't need a new pathway to move if we have a reversible step. So we have 3 steps that are irreversible. We have to have alternate pathways to get around those. That's how basically gluconeogenesis differs, and we'll talk about that in biochemistry.
Why is step 7 not labeled as a regulatory step since we're making ATP?
In what? In glycolysis. Why is step 7 not a regulatory step? Because it can go the opposite way. It's going to consume ATP, but it can do reverse chemistry. Does that make sense?
I'll go back from 3 BP to 1 3 BP.
It's just going to consume ATP in the process. So it can go, yes, it can go forward, it can go backwards, yeah, and it would consume ATP in the process, correct. That's why gluconeogenesis is not a catabolic pathway, but an anabolic pathway, right? It usually requires energy, requires ATP, requires things like NADPH. Yeah, it is reversible. Oh, I gave you guys a quiz. No quiz yet.
Yeah, so
Any of you open up? No. But I'll tell you what, I'll give you 2 quiz questions. 2 quiz questions. That'll give us 4 quizzes. What? No. I'll tell you what, I'll give you 2 quiz questions. You can answer both of them for a total of 8 points. However, I'm only going to give you 12 points total for this section of quizzes, so that's 3 quizzes at 4 points apiece. If you missed one, you can answer both of these, get them right, and get those quiz points back. So, worth 8 possible points. Answer both of them regardless. Answer both of them regardless. Put up your notes. Let's do it. 2 quiz questions. I'll give you 1 quiz question. I'll give you a few minutes to answer it. Then you can turn your thing over. You can write A, B, C, D on the back. And then you can answer question number 2 on the back. Question number 1 should be pretty easy. What's that?
So if we've already got both of the quizzes.
Answer both of these regardless,
Okay.
just in case you miss one.
Okay.
Answer both of these regardless. I will grade your best 3 out of your 4 quizzes. I will grade your best 3 out of your 4 quizzes. Make sure your stuff is put up. Doesn't work. Your first question: which of the following products can be produced directly from glycolysis? NADH, NADPH, ADH, or all of them. Which of the following products can be produced directly from glycolysis? Way of saying this: which of these would be a product of one of these steps of glycolysis? Which of these could possibly be a product from one of the 10 steps, or any of the 10 steps of glycolysis? Okay, flip your answer sheet over, and on the back, write A, B, C, D. Ask a similar question. Question number 2. Which of the following products could be directly generated from the steps in the TCA cycle? A, B, C, D.
Can we choose more than one answer?
Nope. You can. I'll give you about 30 seconds. Okay, pass your answer sheet to the right.
What was the first one?
First one was, this one was MWF.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
What was the last one?
Well, it's like directly, right? So like it has to be the process going from like 1 through 8. So that's why I put all these like.
Yeah. I was thinking FADH2, but then NADH2 also is generated.
Well, FADH is generated like I think like around step 6 or 7. It's like somewhere on this side of the thing.
But then I was thinking about it, but then NAD is also generated, so it might as well be all of the above. Because NADH is generated in tissue, FADH2 is generated, NADPH2 would be generated.
It is in one of the steps. I remember seeing it.
You have all four of the questions right. You took 16 points.
No, but he said he's gonna replace.
Yeah, that's all I ever hear.
I don't know. I haven't looked at these notes too well.
I was looking at it this morning. Do you know what quizzes? That's that too.
You got work today?
No,
You gonna be in the library? Or what?
yeah, library, definitely.
I'm gonna go with you after my second class.
Then we can go through the stuff. I haven't even started reading this. This is not good.
Okay. What's up?
Was the correct answer to this one D?
The correct answer was D.
We
Correct.
had, talking in the hallway beforehand, in the Garrett and Grisham book, it doesn't mention NADPH, but in your notes, you say NADPH.
Correct.
Can you explain again where that falls in? Because I couldn't find an explanation for it.
It is reaction 3. At reaction 3 can exist as different isozymes. Reaction 3 can exist as different isozymes. Really, the difference comes in it's a dimer. Multiple subunit has an alpha subunit, has a beta subunit. The beta subunit is specific for which electron carrier. So various isozymes of the beta subunit causes that enzyme to be specific for NADH or NADP. Or I'm sorry, NAD or NADP. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it can produce both, one or the other. And I specifically said in our notes when we drew it, we're going to draw this like, oh, we need energy, so it's going to require NAD. But can it produce an ADPH? Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So we have no more quizzes. Yay, no more quizzes. You have 4 quizzes, right? 4 quizzes. I'm going to take your best 3. 4 quizzes. I'm going to take your best 3. What's up?
Can one of the quizzes replace the quiz from a previous test?
Yes.
Can one of the quizzes replace a quiz from a previous
Yes.
test?
Yeah. That'd be really good.
No, 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 just from these. Just from these. Okay. I like your option. Pentose phosphate pathway. So we've talked about 2 pathways, glycolysis and TCA cycle. We talked about 2 pathways, glycolysis and TCA cycle, which if you look at a metabolic map, is literally right in the middle, right? Right in the middle in most metabolic maps. It is drawn bold, way darker than everything else. Slime, important, central, next to everything. We talked about some of the shunts, especially in the TCA cycle, where other pathways are pulling on products. We will talk about another pathway that is connected to glycolysis in the TCA cycle. And this pathway is called the pentose phosphate pathway. The pentose phosphate pathway produces 2 things. So glycolysis is produced, glycolysis produces 2 things. Energy, right? In the form of ATP, in the form of pyruvate. The TCA cycle takes that pyruvate and oxidizes it for more ATP to produce electrons, right? High energy electrons that are shuttled into another pathway that we're going to talk about next week. Electron transport chain in mitochondria and oxidative phosphorylation. And a secondary pathway kind of links all the way back up to glucose. It actually links to glucose at step 2. The pentose phosphate pathway produces 2 products. Not really what we talked about so far, has nothing to do with needing energy. It has to do with production of NADPH on a large scale, right? Not like the TCA cycle, on a large scale. NADPH, some people have come and talked to me, what is the difference? And I told them, get to it. We're getting to it today. NADPH is a key player in reductive metabolism. Right? Catabolism, we've talked about, is oxidative. Anabolism, the opposite direction, is reductive. So it's a key function and a key player in reductive anabolism and reductive biosynthesis. And it also produces ribose, simply ribose, triphosphate. Produces a phosphorylated ribose and produce NADPH. NADPH obviously is used in biosynthetic pathways. Ribose in the production DNA, RNA, nucleotides, cofactors. I said before, this pathway is connected to glycolysis. It's connected to glycolysis at multiple points. We'll focus a lot on step 2 because that's where it kind of branches off from. But it's not the only place it can branch off from. It's not the only place it's connected. And there are 2 pathways, 2 phases. There's an oxidative and a non-oxidative. An oxidative pathway produces NADPH. A non-oxidative pathway does not produce NADPH. No oxidation steps in the non-oxidative pathway. So what does this look like? There are a few figures in your textbook. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. There's some good figures in the literature textbook. There are a lot of bad figures in the literature textbook. Good figures in the biochem textbook. However, I think if we draw this out, kind of show where's the branch, where's it connected. Hopefully it'll make a little more sense. Hopefully it's hard to look at the figures in your textbook and see what is really going on. It's a little confusing. We start with glycolysis. We're not going to go through each step of glycolysis. Glycolysis, we're going to start with glucose. Step 1 converts glucose to what? Glucose 6-phosphate. Right? Step 1 converts glucose to glucose 6-phosphate. And if we go all the way back to our notes, on this topic, priming phase, step 1. We talked about it somewhere. Oh, here we go. Glucose to glucose 6-phosphate. At this point, it can follow 3 different pathways. Glucose 6-phosphate offers a branch point for not only catabolism but anabolism. Glycolysis. It can be used as energy storage in the liver. It can also turn and follow the phosphate pathway. So we're talking about. We covered this a long time ago. At this point, you can follow an oxidative step. Notice BP to MWF. Yep. NADP to NADPH. Bless you. 6-phosphate. Phenol. This is rearranged. 6-phosphate. Gluconate. This undergoes another oxidative step. Ribulose 5-phosphate. And we'll break down these reactions, and you'll notice we're not going to spend near as much time on these reactions as we did on previous ones, mainly because most of the pathways we've talked about, most of the reaction mechanisms we talked about are kind of being utilized over and over again. Step 1, an oxidation step. Step 2 is a rearrangement. Step 3, another oxidation step, getting us to ribulose 5-phosphate. At this point, we have a branch point. Ribulose can do these things. Ribulose and 2 different reactions. One of these reactions, we'll call this reaction 4. Reaction 4 leads us with the production of ribose 5-phosphate. Reaction 5. Cellulose 5. We've already talked about production of NADPH. Right? Production of NADPH is used for biosynthesis, right? Things like fatty acids, sugars. Biosynthesis, and also another thing that we're not going to talk about today, but I promise we'll talk about on Wednesday. not in your textbook, and it will be on your exam. This is something you need to come to class for. You need to watch the echo for, I promise you. Biosynthesis, and also regulation of reductants, but really glutathione. ADPH plays a critical role in the reduction or the regulation of glutathione. What is glutathione? Oh, we'll talk about that. I think it's going to be I promise you will have questions on your exam about glutathione, and textbooks really don't talk about it. Manager does for a split second. We'll go into more detail in class. That's one of the things we'll talk about Wednesday. So we talked about we produce an ADPH, we produce ribose. We just talked about ribose. Using the formation of DNA, RNA, what else? DNA, RNA, nucleotides, that goes with DNA and RNA, cofactors, electron carrying cofactors like ADP. Now here's where things get weird, and here's where things get weird. What if the question becomes, what if all of these aren't needed? What if NADPH is needed, but ribose is needed? Why go through this process? Why waste energy to produce something that's not needed? Right? Why waste all this energy? We need two things. We only need one of the two things that are produced. Why waste all this energy? So there's kind of an alternate pathway in which this can be recombined. An alternate pathway in which this can be recombined. Imagine if we don't need ribose. If we don't need ribose, we just need an ADPH. Both of these reactions can occur in equal measure. These two products can undergo another reaction, that's reaction number 6, and this is also a reversible reaction. And that's going to play, it's going to matter. The fact that these reactions are reversible, that some of these are reversible and some of these are irreversible, is going to matter. So reaction number 6, this is two products. Glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, you've seen that before. Should say, yes, I've seen that before. Seven-membered sugar. Reaction. We're going to spend a lot of time. So the reactions that we're going to talk about today are going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Hopefully. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Hopefully. We're going to spend the rest of the class on Wednesday talking about 6, 7, and 8, which is really only 2 reactions because 6 and 8 are the same thing for the most part. This yields 2 products. 6-phosphate. Probably should have seen that before. Last reaction, one of these products, not fructose, incorporates our original vital product from reaction 5. Leave this with fructose. Glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. And most of these you've seen before, right? Not most of these. Fructose 6-phosphate, glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. You've seen before. What is the next step in glycolysis? So our first step is phosphorylation of glucose. Second step, isomerization, right? You don't want glucose 6-phosphate. Why? Because we just used our only terminal alcohol, right? Our only primary alcohol. How can we make a new primary alcohol? Turn this into a ketose, right? Because this is an aldose. Turn it into a ketose, we have another primary alcohol. Add another phosphate group, right? So the next step is an isomerization reaction in which we have fructose 6-phosphate. Fructose 6-phosphate. So imagine if ribose isn't needed, so we don't need to accumulate this product. Right? So if we go to our original pathway, we've produced our NADPH. Imagine we don't need ribose. This ribose can be consumed to form some amount of fructose 6-phosphate, which what do you think happens? It'll be dumped right back into glycolysis, right? Both dumped right back into glycolysis. Keep going. Going down. Eventually, we're going to form glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. Oh, produce glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, so you can imagine the exact same thing. It's going to be funneled right back into glycolysis. Eventually, so what I want you to see is that you can imagine this pathway does different things under different conditions. If we need ribose, then all of a sudden we're going to pull this reaction through 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we're going to be done, right? We're going to lose energy. We're going to take away from one pathway, from something to another pathway. If all we need is one of our products, we can reuse our ribose to get all the way back to glycolysis. So, some questions you could ask yourself. Ask, what is needed? And the Biochem textbook does a really good job talking about this. The textbook does here talking about how this fits into the scheme. If only NADPH is needed. Only NADPH is needed. So if only NADPH is needed, you can imagine this pathway. Just talked about it. We produce NADPH. If we don't need ribose, we can reuse that ribose. Fructose gets funneled back to fructose, and this reaction is reversible, correct? And if we need more NADPH, we can reuse that, and we have all of a sudden have a cycle, right? So if we only need NADPH under the best circumstances, 1 glucose can be used to produce about 12 NADPH. That's pretty impressive. 1 glucose can be used to produce about 12 NADPH if we only need NADPH. Right? So we have no sink. We have nothing is pulling on ribose to form DNA, RNA. Nucleotides. If we need NADPH and ribose, you can imagine this is going to occur, and we're going to consume ribose, and this all of a sudden does not look near as efficient. If we need NADPH and ribose, 1 glucose is going to yield us about 2 NADPH and 1 ribose. Only ribose, this is where it gets weird. On average, 5 glucose yields about 6 ribose. And I told you, this is where it gets weird, right? On average, 5 glucose yields 6 ribose. Why? This is where I told you if we only need ribose, if we don't need to produce an ADPH, all of a sudden you can imagine these reaction arrows, we can call these reaction arrows, are also reversible. Right? Imagine these reaction arrows right here are also reversible. So we can start pulling from glycolysis down further in the chain to come all the way up. These are also reversible. If you have the Biochem textbook, it does a really good job working out the math for this last one. The other ones aren't very difficult to see. The last one, the Biochem textbook does a really good job working out the math for those. Key idea, it's a complex cycle. It can produce two things, but it doesn't have to produce two things. It can work around to satisfy the needs and still produce as much energy and save as much energy as we can. Try to get through the first five, and like I said, we're not going to spend much time on these, other than a little review here and there. First reaction is done by an enzyme, glucose 6-phosphate. So if we look at this, first step, what type of enzyme is it? Oxidoreductase, right? It's a dehydrogenase. This one is a dehydrogenase. Glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase. It's glucose 6-phosphate. You can tell it's winter, everybody's sniffling. Me included. Feel it. So this is the conversion of glucose 6-phosphate to 6, not G. Six-phosphogluconyl acetone. What types of questions would you see on your exam? You will see, is this a 1-electron oxidation, a 2-electron oxidation, a 1-electron reduction, a 2-electron reduction? And that depends. And I ask you, I plead with you, read the question and answer the question. Because I could easily ask you, is this a 1-electron oxidation of glucose? Is it a 1-electron oxidation of ADP? Is it a 2-electron oxidation, 2-electron reduction, whatever. Or I could refer to this in terms of our original glucose 6-phosphate. You can refer to it in terms of our electron carrier. It would be an oxidation of this. It would be a reduction of this, right? So please read the question. Don't assume, oh, all the answers are 2-electron oxidations. All the answers aren't going to be 2-electron oxidations. I'm going to refer to this in terms of glucose 6-phosphate. Yes, it is a 2-electron oxidation. How do we know that? You may also, instead of being asked, is this entire reaction of 2 electrons, you may be asked, what is the oxidation state on carbon 1 of 6-phosphogluconyl acetone? So if I ask that, if I ask about specific carbon numbers, oxidation state, what's the oxidation state of this carbon, carbon number 1? Now, obviously on the exam, I won't say what's the oxidation state of this carbon. I would ask, what's the oxidation state of carbon number 1 on glucose 6-phosphate? How do you know? down to an oxygen, it's down to an oxygen, it's down to another carbon, it's down to a hydrogen. Oxidation state would be +1. If you don't remember how to calculate that, go back and look the notes, we went over it. How to calculate oxidation states on carbon. That's the case here. Now all of a sudden my carbon is down to 1 carbon and 3 oxygen bonds. So now it's +3, right? You can say this is a 2-electron oxidation of glucose 6-phosphate. Right? It's a 2-electron oxidation of glucose 6-phosphate. You could also say this is a 2-electron reduction of NADP. So please read the question. I promise you I'll ask questions like that. I'm not trying to trick you. I'm trying to get you to answer the question that's asked.
So whenever questions are given like this, will the structure be given also, or do we just need to know the structure of it by the name?
Specifically one like this, you should know this because it falls. This is kind of an important one. I probably wouldn't ask you to draw this. I'd probably give you the structure. This one you probably should know. It's very important. One, it's the first step of glycolysis, and it's a metabolic branch point of 3 various pathways. This is important. So that one you should probably do. You should be able to draw glucose, right? It's glucose with a phosphate group in 6 position. Reaction number 2 is catalyzed by an enzyme called lactinase. In your textbook, you may see gluconolactanase. Biochem calls it gluconolactanase, and Glandular just calls it lactanase. Usually referred to as lactanase. Opening or ring structure. This is not an oxidation step. There's no NADPH. Step 1 and step 3. Sleep with 6-phosphoglycine. Sixes and G's, like, oh man. Reaction number 3. Hydrogenase. Imagine if it's a dehydrogenase reaction, what is it going to do? It's not acetoreductase. Right? So this is coupled to the formation of NADPH, and the phosphate oxidation. Drawn this way, and you can see something that looks similar. It should look familiar. I hope this is familiar, but that's not. This is an oxidative heat of oxidation. I do my CO2 group different here. Maybe I do. What did you say? Say it louder. It looks a lot like one of the steps of the TCA cycle, doesn't it? Hopefully that stands out to you. It looks a lot like one of the steps of the TCA cycle, right? You remember which step? One of the irreversible. Yeah, it was, you're right. It should look a lot like step 3. Look at step 3. You see a similarity? Step 3. Step 2, both these reactions. Step 3 of pentose phosphate looks a lot like step 3 of the TCA cycle, doesn't it? Looks a lot like step 3 of the TCA cycle. Here's the difference. What's the difference? Here we're losing our CO2 group. What's the difference in this CO2 group versus this CO2 group that we're losing? One of them is terminal, so we could call that a primary carboxyl group, I guess you would say, right? But this one is not a primary. This would be a secondary carboxyl group, right? Secondary, it's bound to a carbon that's bound to 2 other carbons. This one is bound to a carbon that's only bound to 1 other carbon. So primary carboxyl group. So you can imagine there's probably different rates. One of these is probably going to be a better leaving group than the other. However, it looks a lot alike, doesn't it? It looks a lot alike. Again, which carbon is being oxidized in this step? That's a good question. That would be a really good question. Just identify the carbon that's being oxidized. What carbon number is being oxidized? We look at our original step. Carbon number 3, right? So carbon number 3 is being oxidized. What's our oxidation state here? 0, right? We have no charge. Oxidation state of 0, right? Oxidation state here plus 2, so we have a loss of 2 electrons. So again, this would be a 2 electron oxidation of 6-phosphogluconate. 2 electron oxidation of 6-phosphogluconate, or you can say a 2 electron reduction of NAD plus. 2 electron reduction of NAD plus. Yes. And real quick, let's talk about your next 2 reactions. Very briefly. Reaction number 4. An isomerase reaction. Reaction number 5 is very similar. So knowing the difference between an epimer and an isomer. An isomer is an exchange of groups between carbons. Epimer. exchange of groups on the same carbon. Think about it as an exchange of positions on the same carbon. Phosphopentos isomerase. If you wanted a reaction mechanism, you could refer to glycolysis. Step 5. We didn't go through and draw a reaction mechanism for step 5. Why? Because glycolysis step 5 is the exact reverse of what's happening in step 2, right? With glycolysis. Step 2, we draw a reaction mechanism. Step 5 is the same thing. It's just going a different direction. The exact same thing going a different direction. If you did go back and draw and come up with a reaction mechanism, or look in the textbook for a reaction mechanism in step 5, it's the same thing for phosphopentos isomerase. The epimerase looks a little different. Let's try it. May go over it. We'll get this finished. So yes, go back and look at that one. This is catalyzed by an active site residue. Glutamate. Proton. All these double bonds around. Unstable, intermediate. Why is this intermediate unstable? What does this intermediate contain to make it unstable? Charged oxygen, right? You can draw it. Charged oxygen. CNO. I have a habit of drawing too many parts. Imagine this unstable intermediate is basically going to grab the hydrogen collapse right back in on itself, going to yield a mixture of two products. Imagine those two products are probably going to be its starting material to some degree. Some degree of ephemer, hydrogen. If you're confused, if you're having trouble, if you want to go back and try number 4 and you're having trouble, it looks a lot like reaction number 5, except this isomer. Your double bond didn't move, right? So your double bond here didn't move. All that happened was our OH came from here to here. And this reaction, reaction number 5, our double bond is going to move to form an aldose, right? It's going to go from a ketose to an aldose. Imagine we're probably going to get to the similar intermediate step, except this double bond is probably not going to work. Okay. tomorrow we will go over reaction 6 and 8. Tomorrow, Wednesday, we'll go over 6 and 8. We'll go over 7, 6, 8, 7, and we'll talk about glutathione. And that'll be it for your exam. Do you have to know all these mechanisms? Again, you should be able to come up and draw a mechanism given information. You should be able to do that. That's not the question I'm going to ask. The question I would ask would be, I'm assuming you have these active site residues, what would happen if this was perturbed, or if this was perturbed, or if we were under these conditions? And if you don't know the reaction mechanism, how are varying conditions going to affect that reaction mechanism? Does that make sense? Yeah, I would give you an active site. If I give you an active site, how would a perturbation to whatever physiological condition affect the reaction mechanism?